The answer is yes, we are recording and we are using the mics. Everyone, if you're speaking, mics, otherwise no one will know what you're saying for time immemorial. Okay, please. Thank you. All right. So having done that, having discussed this a little bit with staff, what we're going to start with is, I think, a round of staff introductions and then a round of introductions of our own. Those introductions will include a very short, a few sentences about what you're hoping to do with this committee, on this committee. What interested you? Why are you here? Very short. And then we'll have a staff presentation on various pieces of land use and planning, what the committee work is likely to entail, what it's going to look like. And then we'll have a test at the end. I'll probably ask the same question again. All right. So having said that.
Just thought it would be good for the committee to be introduced to our planning department. These are the planners that will be bringing reports to you at the upcoming land use and development committee meetings. So on my left is Jaden Riley. He's our manager of planning. Next to Jaden is Lauren Mattiuzzi, who's our senior planner. Lauren does a lot of the applications reports. So many of the reports that are coming to you will be coming through Lauren. And then on the far right is Holden Blue, and he is our senior planning policy planner. So Holden's going to be doing a lot of the work on the OCP update that we're going to be working on this next year and hopefully have adopted by the end of this year. We also have Kevin Kaiser. He's not here right now, but he does a lot of the site plan review for building permits and does site plan review for various applications, both in terms of planning and building. So that's the planning department. And I'm Chris Marshall. I'm the director of planning and development. So I'm responsible for the planning department, the building department, and the ECDev department. So those are my responsibilities. And then maybe I'll pass it on to Rachel.
Sure. My name is Rachel Gray. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer for the District of Sooke. And I'm just here for the first few meetings just to kind of get the pulse of this. It's been a while since we've had this committee back. So, but yes, Chris will be your main point person and the planning team going forward. She's coming.
I'm Cassandra Cruz. I'm the Executive Office Coordinator. I'm here to learn just as much as the committee members are right now.
And then in the corner, we have Thomasina Barnes, who works in the corporate department, corporate services department, and does our minutes and helps run the meetings and put the agendas together. So. And if there's any technical difficulties, it's her fault.
Maybe just, and I'll just add, Ms. Bagnall, our Director of Corporate Services, Corporate Officer, is home unwell today, so it isn't here in person. Probably will be here for the next meeting as well. We have a new Deputy Corporate Officer starting in a couple weeks who will be the main point person from corporate support for this, for the committees.
I would point out that Tommy is actually responsible for any administrative snafus, and we have a technical IT bunch that are responsible for those. So we have people responsible for all sorts of mistakes and those. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, Jeff Bateman, Councillor, District of Sooke, and I think you were wondering what I might hope for from this committee. So yesterday we had our first Community Economic Development Committee. So I'm very interested in the way that these two committees will interact. One of the big themes yesterday was the need to really develop employment lands, commercial space in the town center in particular. So I'm curious to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I'm Al Beddoes. I'm a counselor as well. Oh. Yeah, anyways, Al Beddoes, counselor, being counselor for 6 years. I'm interested in getting some other people's opinions. I've worked with council now, most of them for 6 years and Kevin just for 3. And I'm interested in other people's opinion because I know how these guys think fairly well, although they surprise me every other meeting. But it's nice to have some fresh blood and have a look at things and give us some direction to where we need to go. So, thanks.
Good afternoon, Robert Barry. Moved to Sooke in 1969. Moved out of Sooke for a few years, back again. I've been running mostly energy efficiency company, HVAC company for about 40 years. Started out in the solar hot water business when everybody thought I was a bit crazy. Seems to be the thing now. But yeah, heavily involved in builders, developers, architects, engineers, mostly throughout Victoria and the islands and as far out as Sooke. Our company did the original HVAC equipment and systems here in the fire hall and the municipal hall here. The Western Foods Mall, we did all that work and we're still working away. Our office is in Victoria. And I live on the Sooke River, yes, across. Yeah, so, you know, back in the day, my mom was CRD director. My parents were quite involved in politics at that time. And I saw Sooke was going to get amalgamated. And I thought, yes, we're going to have some direction. And we're still soon to be going down this windy road of direction. So I'm just hoping to jump on board and help sail that ship.
Tony St. Pierre, so also on council for the last 6 years. I've got a master's in rural planning and a master's in rural development. So a lot of this stuff I should know, but I'd have to admit I'm always learning. My main interest, honestly, in the land use piece is really in seeing what we can do to realize the vision of the community through the OCP with the assistance of developers and how we can make that happen. And also just providing the kind of feedback through staff and these reports to council that can help make good decisions.
My name is Desiree Cumming. I'm the owner of West Coast Design and Development, and I'm also an engineer. I'm also 3rd generation from Sooke, so I'm normally on the other end helping my clients submit applications and things. So I'm excited to see it from this end and be more involved. And as a young business owner, I hope to start off on the right foot and help.
My name is Helen Ritz. I have lived in Sooke since 2010. I recently retired, but spent probably 30 years working for an architecture firm and an urban planning firm as the marketing director. I was on the OCP Citizens Advisory Committee. So I joined, or I applied to join this so that I could help carry that forward. I live downtown, so I'm very interested to see how Sooke develops. And after 30 years of working with urban planners, I feel like I have something to offer. So here I am, and I'm excited to move forward.
Thank you. And when you said short introduction, you were looking right at me. My name is Kevin Pearson. I'm a counselor. I think I'm in my 12th year of being on council. Really, really excited to be working with fellow counselors and members of the public with the expertise that you guys have. Like, I mean, there's, you know, I think somewhere in the neighborhood of about 90 years of experience just from you 3 people joining us in the field of land development, community use. So I'm really excited because yesterday we were at got mentioned that we were at the Economic Development Committee meeting. And there's no way that we can talk about economic development without talking about land use. They're intrinsic to each other. So I'm really, you know, hoping to get out of this committee a view of what we can do in the short term, roadblocks, and then that long-term vision, the OCP. How do we integrate all of that into, you know, a better suit? This committee is long overdue, in my opinion. You know, we're 2.5 years into a mandate. My opinion is we should have them they should be a standing committee that gets implemented within the first 3 months of every new election. Anyways, that's my opinion. Looking forward to work with you. And I do have to leave at 1:25 to go downstairs to the Sierra Wandafuca Water Commission meeting. So I'll be stepping out, but I'll be at all the other meetings. Okay, thank you. At this point, I think we're going to pass.
Thank you, Councilor Pearson and everyone. And at this point, we're going to pass it back to staff for, I believe, a presentation. Yes? Perfect. Thank you.
Can I just confirm, do you see the presentation on the screens in front of you, or are you looking at the TV? Everybody's got it on. Okay, so I don't have to point at screens. You're on board there. Okay. So just a little intro. I'm Chris Marshall. I'm the Director of Planning and Development. Like I said, I've been here 10 months or so. And I got a master's in urban planning from McGill University, and I spent my first 17 years in BC, mostly on the Sunshine Coast for the town of Gibsons as the planner there. I then went back to Ontario for 12 years and worked for the town of Huntsville and the city of Kawartha Lakes, just north of Toronto. And I'm back again. I've been back about 3 years, and so I live up in Courtenay half the week and come down here half the week. So I have a place here, but I'm going back and forth. So that's my background. And just also as an intro, I'm going to give you a lot of information in this presentation. And, you know, it's really meant to be an intro to planning. The counselors can, you know, do other work, because I'm sure this is all stuff you're well aware of and familiar with. But I was making assumptions for the rest of you that you're fairly new to planning. Maybe not Helen. Sounds like you had lots of years of experience with planning, but just to provide you an overview of what planning is and what our bylaws are, and you know, really meant to be an introduction. I'm sure you'll go away and you won't remember half of what I've said, but if some of it sinks in, then you'll be in a meeting a few months from now and go, oh yeah, Chris told us about that. So hopefully this, like I say, just kind of gets you started. So I'm just going to skip the welcome because Chair did that already. So just to give you a sense of, you know, what is it about this? So I'm just getting on the slide here. So municipalities in British Columbia are created by the Local Government Act, and the Local Government Act identifies, you know, how municipalities get incorporated, how they're created, how councils are elected, how taxes are collected, the role of council, heritage conservation, bylaw enforcement. So the Local Government Act gives municipalities the authority to run these various functions. And the planning function is one of those functions that the Local Government Act gives municipalities the ability to run. So definition of planning, I'm sure there's hundreds. I got this particular definition off the Planning Institute of British Columbia website. So planning means the planning of the scientific, aesthetic, and orderly disposition of land, resources, facilities, and services with a view to securing the physical, economic, and social efficiency, health, and well-being of urban and rural communities. So that's quite a mouthful, but I think it actually does a pretty good job of summarizing what planning is. And, you know, as a planner throughout my life, it's always been difficult to tell people, well, what do you do? What does an urban planner do? So there it is right there in one paragraph. So there's, I like to describe planning as having, well, with municipalities having two aspects. There's sort of the long-term aspect of planning. That's the official community plans, the master plans, the neighborhood plans, the sort of policy of planning. And on the second aspect is the actual day-to-day applications. So the long-term plans provide the direction for where we want to go as a municipality. And then the day-to-day applications, the rezonings, the official community plan amendments, the development permit applications, minor variances, all those things help to implement that long-term vision. So what's considered good planning? So basically what we're trying to promote as planners generally, not just in Sooke, but worldwide, is to try and focus development in a downtown core, to have a mix of uses, to have a higher density of development wherever possible, because with a higher density of development and a more compact type of community, you're more able to walk, ride your bike, drive less, it's healthier. You're making better use of the existing infrastructure that's in the ground, the existing sidewalks, roads, street lights, sewer pipes, drainage pipes, all of those things that are already in the ground in a downtown core or an urban growth area. Whereas if you go out to what they call the greenfield development out on the periphery of towns, now you have to bring all those services, roads, pipes, all out to that area. You have to clear, a pristine forest. Whereas if you're developing in the existing developed area, you're not nuking a whole natural area. And you're keeping people close to where the services are, so they can walk to the store, they can ride their bike to work, they can do everything they need to do in the growth area. So that's generally what we're trying to do as planners, is trying to focus development in a more compact form, higher denser form, to get all those benefits. You can imagine if you built a kilometer road and it was all large lot, single family, you might have 10 homes on that road. You still need the same length of sewer pipes for those 10 homes. You need that for a full 10-kilometer road. You need the street lights, the sidewalks, the paved surface, the curbs, all the things that go into that road. You're creating all of that brand new for 10 homes. If you can do that same thing in the downtown core on an existing couple of lots that you assemble, you could do a 30-unit apartment building, and you don't need to create sometimes any more road, any more sidewalk, any more sewer, other than a connection from the building into that sewer pipe going down the street. You're not cutting down trees. You're not, creating any more impermeable surfaces for drainage. So, we understand as planners that people like to live in single family homes in the periphery of town. But for the financial viability of a town as well, single family homes on large lots do not pay their fair share. So if we were to have a municipality that was all single family homes, we would be losing money every year. It wouldn't matter how many single family homes we had, they don't pay their way, because of the fact that they need so much infrastructure. And yes, the developer does pay for those roads and all those services up front. But 20 years from now, we have to replace those roads. We have to maintain those roads. We have to replace the pipes under the roads, the sidewalks. So there aren't enough taxes being collected from single family homes to pay the way. So from a financial perspective, when a developer comes in and says, oh, I'm gonna, provide all these taxes to the community, I'm like, well, actually, not really. Yes, there is a need for that form of housing, but it's not necessarily paying its way. So those are just some of the things that we as planners are trying to think of, and are sort of part of our professional ethic and mantra is to try and achieve that. So in terms of the municipal, the district of Sooke, the council recently did a brand new strategic plan. It's for the years 2024 to 2027. And there were 5 main strategic areas of focus. But what I've sort of brought out and sort of highlighted and made larger is the sustainable growth and environmental stewardship. So this particular focus, it says we promote sustainable land use planning to accommodate growth while minimizing environmental impact and maintaining Sooke's West Coast aesthetic. We prioritize the protection of blue and green spaces and the implementation of the best environmental practices when planning for growth and development. So that's this council's strategic goal for the next 3 years. And we as staff, when we write reports, we try and keep these strategic areas of focus as part of our rationale for why we recommend particular policies, projects, initiatives that the District of Sooke puts into place. We're looking to think about these particular goals, but the one that is a particular note for us is the sustainable growth and environmental stewardship. So in terms of getting back to the Local Government Act, the section of the Local Government Act that is related to sort of planning and land use management is Part 14. And Part 14 looks at what is involved with an official community plan and what needs to be included in an official community plan. So an official community plan is a sort of long-term vision for the community. They're usually done for a 20-year period. The Local Government Act says that you should be including in your OCP land uses. So what types of development you want to see happen on the land in the future, long term, your policies around agriculture, the preservation and protection, enhancement of the natural environment. So those natural forests, creeks, rivers, foreshore areas, and rare and endangered species, those types of things that we're looking to protect in the official community plans. Policies around transportation, our parks, our trails. And it also identifies how we, if we want to make changes to our official community plan, what sort of a process we need to go through in order to do that. And at the bottom of the screen there, I've got section 461, and that's directly related to this committee. It says a council may by bylaw establish an advisory planning commission to advise council on all matters respecting land use, community planning, or proposed bylaws and permits. So that's the authority that the BC government has given municipalities, that ability to create this committee. So you know you're legit. So getting back to those 2 types of planning, there's the long-term planning and then the short-term planning. But in terms of the long-term planning, as I was explaining, it's a long-term vision. And usually what we do is we start with, when we're creating an official community plan, we start with sort of the demographics of the area. So how has the population been growing over a 50-year period? And you kind of take that growth and you project that into the future. And so, you know, it might be a 1 or a 2% growth. We project that out into the future, and we see that in 20 years, we'll need an additional, there'll be an additional, say, 5,000 people in Sooke. So then we have to identify in the official community plan, where are those people going to live? And so residential land uses. Where are we going to locate those residential land uses? Where are we going to locate the single family versus the higher density multifamily? where are people going to shop? Where are people going to recreate? Parks? Where are they going to work? Where are they going to yeah, so all of the different types of land uses you can think of, we need to be planning for that growth long into the future. And we need to show how we're accommodating that. We also need to identify how we're going to service and how people are going to get around, where, you know, the trails they're going to walk on, the roads they're going to drive on, the sewer, water, drainage, all those services that are going to be needed. So in our existing official community plan, it states in the beginning, the OCP serves as a foundation for all policies, regulations, and decisions pertaining to land use and development in a municipality. It provides direction and a framework for decisions that will shape the future form and character of the whole community. So you have to think of the official community plan as being the upper tier, and then everything falls out from there. So our transportation master plan, our servicing master plan, our parks and trails master plan, our zoning bylaws, our development cost charges, everything flows from the official community plan. It provides that beacon of light, that direction, and then everything should flow down from that. It doesn't happen always in that perfect order where you get the official community plan done and then you get all those other bits and pieces done, because they're always being updated along the way. But that's, you know, in a perfect world, that's how it would all happen and all unfold. So this is our official community plan land use map. So as you can see, there's a number of different colors there. Each one of those colors identifies a different land use and each of those land use has a description as to what is permitted to be developed in that land use. So along with the land use plan, we have this is our parks and trails routes overview. So you get a sense of where the parks are in the community and the different trails and networks that we're trying to ensure get developed in the future. This is next slide is where our environmentally sensitive areas have been located. Yep.
This, unfortunately, we're in the middle of the new OCP, but these are all the old OCP, the one we're working to now.
That's correct.
And my understanding, when you said earlier, somebody did, is that we hope to have the new OCP sort of finished by December, I think is what we're aiming for. So when we go through some of our exercises that we're going to look at here, which one of these two documents, because like you would show me the downtown plan for density, and I know it's changed quite a bit with the new OCP, and I suspect, and Helen will probably agree with me, we'll probably end up keeping that new OCP downtown. So I guess I'm asking is, are we going to take into account both of them while we work in this the first 6 months of our mandate?
So until the new official community plan gets adopted, we can look at it, we can refer to it, but ultimately the document that's been adopted by council, which is bylaw 400, is the one that we work with. So we do take into account, like you'll see in our reports when they come forward to you, and I do have an example report a little further on that sort of identifies the different things we speak to in a report. There are some times when we'll say, here's what the existing official community plan identifies as being, you know, why we're recommending it. And this also matches our new official community plan that hasn't been adopted. So we might refer to it, but ultimately it's the document that has been adopted by council and is in place is the one that we have to kind of work from. So this map is just showing all the creeks and the foreshore. It identifies that there's a 30-meter riparian area setback for all the creeks and rivers in the community. There's a 15-meter setback requirement along the foreshore. So when we are looking at development in a particular area, we refer to this map, and if there's a creek identified there, then these are and there's a whole section of the official community plan that speaks directly to how we go about reviewing developments that have these constraints on them. So one of the applications that may come forward to you is what's called an official community plan amendment application. And so that application is to make a change to the official community plan. And usually what it refers to is making a change to one of the land uses on the land use map. So for instance, if there was a property that was adjacent to the growth area and it's shown as being yellow, which is residential, somebody might come in and provide an argument for why that neighboring property should be allowed to go commercial. And so they would apply for an amendment to the official community plan to change that property from what it's presently designated, which is residential, to say a commercial. They could come in and apply to increase the density of a residential property that is only designated at this point as single family, but maybe there's a valid rationale for increasing that density to a higher form of development, like an apartment or townhouse. So, and sometimes an official community plan amendment will come in with a rezoning application. So you can combine the two applications, because you can't rezone a property if it doesn't match the official community plan. The first thing planners do when someone comes in and says, I'm thinking of doing this amazing new store on this property, I look at the official community plan and it's residential designation. I go, well, no, I can't recommend that. If you applied for a rezoning, I would have to recommend against it. So you still have the right to apply and provide your arguments to council, but as staff, we're looking at the official community plan and it doesn't show that. So then they say, well, how do I fix that? Well, you have to amend the official community plan and and as part of the rezoning application. So so the other thing in the official community plan is what we call development permit areas. And so the Local Government Act has identified a number of different categories of land use in which you can require a development permit be applied for before you can do a development on that property. And the kinds of things that a development permit can be issued for is hazardous land, so floodplains or steep slopes. It can be to protect agriculture. It can be to protect natural environments like the creeks and rivers and things. It can be to revitalize commercial use, or it can be for what we call a form and character development permit. So we have 3 development permit areas in our official community plan. We have the town center area. So we have a whole series of design guidelines around what we want to see in terms of the look and feel of development in the downtown area. We have the community growth and comprehensive development areas, and that includes the environmentally sensitive lands in that second development permit area. And then the third category is for the multifamily, commercial, industrial, institutional styles of development. And we have design guidelines for each of those types of development. So just as an example, on the right side of that slide, there's an example of a building being right up on the street and an example of a building being set back from the street with parking in front. So in this case, what our design guidelines are asking for is that if you're going to do a development in our downtown core, we want to see the building up to the street, because that makes the pedestrian activity more interesting. It's more active than having the sidewalk and then a sea of asphalt and then a building. So it's more attractive, it's nicer for pedestrians, and it's just a a more attractive form of development. So that's like an example of a design guideline that we're encouraging people to develop by. In the example on the right side there, there's a do this and not this. So the not this is, and this is showing when you're doing development next to a, say, a single family home, like a bungalow, and you're going to put a tall apartment building right next door. What this is saying is we want you to step down the architecture of the tall building so that you're not, it's not such an imposing face right next to a single family residence. So in the bottom picture, you can see it's just a straight wall next to the single family home. And in the upper picture, there's a sort of stepping down of the built form towards that single family home. Because you can imagine if you lived in a single family home and you had a single family residence next door to you for 30 years, and then all of a sudden a developer buys up the neighboring 3 lots and puts up a 6-story apartment building, that would be pretty shocking. And so we are always trying to mitigate that impact on the neighbors. So the design guidelines are meant to, because part of the official community plan states that we want to preserve the character of Sooke. We don't want just anywhere North America development in our communities. So just strip malls and parking lots and no landscaping and no concern for the types of materials and things used in the construction of the buildings. We want something that speaks to us, that when we look at that building, we go, oh, that's in Sooke. You know, that's a Sooke style of home or building. So this is an example of the Bayshore development. This is the one on Sooke Road, just by Church Road, that's got the crane on the property right now, and they've just started construction. This was a development permit application. It was actually an amendment to an existing development permit because they made changes to the design of the building. This is the residential building that's going to be mixed with some commercial, but this particular building is just the residential portion. And on the picture on the left, this was the original submission. And you can see there's quite a stark concrete blank wall being shown in that picture. And we actually have design guidelines in the town center that say, when you have these large blank walls, we want you to incorporate architectural design features and materials, different styles of materials and things that help to break up that wall visually. So it's not just this stark blank concrete wall. So you can see in the right-hand picture, those were the changes that we required the developer to consider in the amendment, so that it did exactly what the design guidelines were asking for them to do. So you can see on the picture on the right, they've used different materials, they've used different colors, landscaping, they've got an arboretum. So that picture on the bottom right corner of the screen is actually an arboretum along the base of that wall that'll kind of, you know, soften the look of that wall. So there's things you can do with landscaping, architecture, design that help to make a building more interesting looking. So coming out of the official community plan is the zoning bylaw. And the zoning bylaw is how you implement the official community plan. And it identifies what you can do on every single property in Sooke. So every single property in Sooke, just going to the next slide here, showing the land use, the zoning map. So that shows every single property in Sooke, and it shows a different color on every single one of those properties in Sooke. And just going to the next slide, that's a zoomed in area of the sort of downtown in Sooke. So you can see there's letters and numbers associated with every one of the lots. So the yellow area is the R1, which is our large lot rural. and then the, or large lot residential, and then the C2, which is kind of our downtown, that's our general commercial zone. So, once again, the Local Government Act gives municipalities the authority to put zoning bylaws in place. And what they say is that a local government may by bylaw do one or more of the following: divide the whole or part of the municipality or regional district into zones, name each zone and establish the boundaries of the zones, limit the vertical extent of a zone and provide other zones above or below it, regulate the following within the zone: the use of the land, buildings and other structures, the density of the use of land, buildings and other structures, the siting, size, dimensions. So just going to an example of one of our zones. So this is the yellow area on the zoning map. So every one of the lots that's zoned R1 has these criteria that you can put on that lot. So in terms of the permitted uses, you're allowed to have horticulture, single family dwelling, or one duplex per lot. So that's all you can do on that lot. You can't put a store on there. You can't put a parking lot on there. You can't put a multifamily apartment building, townhouse, any other use. You can only have a single family dwelling on that lot or a duplex. And then below that, it identifies, you might have one of those yellow R1 zoned areas that's a large lot, might be like a couple of hectares. So if you wanted to subdivide that lot, then we have minimum lot sizes and widths for that particular lot. So you might get 10 lots out of that 2 hectare area. And that identifies how you can separate up that big lot into smaller lots. The other things that are in there is like how much of a setback you have from the front of the house to the road, how much of a setback you need to have from the side of the house to the neighboring lot line, how much of a setback you need from the rear of the house to the rear property line, how tall the building can be. So the zoning bylaw, whereas the official community plan is a long-term vision for the community and land uses in the community, the zoning bylaw is very specific about exactly what you can do on that property. So this is the C2 zone. And as a contrast to the R1 zone, look at all the uses you can have in there. You can have an amusement facility, an assembly use, auto service, cannabis retail, convenience store, funeral home, gas bar. You can have residential above the retail. You have a much higher height you're allowed. You don't have to have the same setbacks. It's a very different zone. So all of the red zone properties in downtown Sooke that are C2, they all have the ability to have every one of these uses on them and have this size and setbacks. Yeah.
Just like to take a small moment here and see, as long as it's all right with you.
Yeah, sure.
If anybody has any questions, because we've just absorbed a whole lot of information. Does anybody have any questions at this point in time for our Director of Planning, Chris? Or shall we just forge ahead?
Yep.
Rob?
More of a comment than a question. It's just on the tall commercial buildings. When I drive up the Sooke Hill and look at the BC Housing building, that looks awfully flat and awfully similar from floor to floor. I'm just wondering who designed that and how did that get through if we're supposed to be doing step backs and different types of.
So are you talking about the ones on the east end of town coming in? Sorry? Yeah, the McCall, yeah. So so apartment buildings are permitted uses and there aren't any, if I'm thinking about it correctly, there aren't any single family homes that are immediately adjacent to those buildings. So what we're trying to do in terms of stepping down of buildings is if you have a single family home or a smaller building right next to it, that like I'm talking right next to it, then you want to try and scale things down. But in terms of the facades of those buildings, we don't dictate, we try and get different materials, we try and get balconies, wind fenestration, roof lines, landscaping. But, there's a fine line between being, the government and telling you exactly how you can build your building and what it has to look like, and being conscious of that we're trying to look out for the greater good of the community. Because of course the developer wants to develop what they want to develop, and who are you to tell me how to develop my building and what it should look like and all that. So it's a fine line. We're trying to provide some guidance, and you got to remember, development permit design guidelines aren't requirements, they're guidelines. And so if the developer decides that they don't agree with a particular guideline or guidance, they'll say, in my case, in this particular circumstance, I don't believe that that guideline fits this particular site, because there's no single family homes right next to me. So I don't think I should have to, that's not relevant to my development. So they have there is a give and take in this discussion. It is kind of a bit of a negotiation between staff and the developer when they're looking at guidelines. There might be a situation like where we want the commercial buildings to be up on the sidewalk to create that street face. I mean, I worked in the town of Gibson's, and there was an existing mall where the mall was already set way back on the site, and they wanted to add a London Drugs to it. Well, they couldn't put it on the street because the whole mall was already back on the back of the lot. So in that case, we couldn't really require them to put the building, because they wanted to add it to the existing mall. So it's not all, the design guidelines are general in nature, and they don't work for every single site. So we have to kind of pick and choose the ones that are relevant in that case. Sure.
Turn it on. Okay. One of them is just with regards to the OCP. I'm sure that everyone is actually potentially wondering what the role of this committee will be in the process of developing the OCP. So I imagine you'll cover that at some point, but if you want to provide some comments on that. And the other one is, I noted specifically in the residential, and this is just so that people have a chance to have a better understanding, that bed and breakfasts are allowed, but we now have new provincial legislation with regards to that. And I was wondering if you could educate us on how we interact with that provincial legislation.
So there's two things there. One is that bed and breakfasts are permitted in single family homes. And in that case, it's a bedroom within the house that you're living in. So whereas if you're talking about a short-term rental situation like an Airbnb, that can either be a room in the home or a separate suite within that home. So the new legislation, the Bill 44, the new housing legislation that came in, I'm not sure if it's part of 44, but said that Airbnbs can no longer be separate, like a whole house or a full apartment. It can only be within an existing dwelling. So there has to be a house with a suite in it, a room in the house, something over an existing garage. It has to be a self-contained thing. So what they're trying to get away from is having somebody who owns 10 apartments in an apartment building and Airbnbs them all out. They don't live there. It's not part of their residence. It's not like a mortgage helper. It's just a separate apartment that you're short-term rentaling. And while you're short-term renting those apartments, of course, those apartments aren't available for people to rent. And so it takes away from the rental stock in the community. And so the province is trying to rein in the whole short-term rental industry or business because it is taking away from people's ability to rent in the community.
Ellen?
Just put your mic on.
We'll remember that one day. Maybe to answer that, I would say that for all these allowed, like bakery, brew pub, bus depot, cannabis, they're all businesses, so they would have to have, there would be regulations around these. So although the zoning may say you could have a car wash or a cannabis retail, when you actually look into, or an Airbnb, when you actually look into the regulations, you would not. So it's kind of a separate discussion from zoning.
And I think that's actually getting at part of also what there are additional regulations over and above and beyond what we can place down. We can say that Airbnb, or sorry, that bed and breakfast is okay, but if there's further provincial legislation or other legislation, we have to come into alignment with that as well. So there are also those pieces. Local government doesn't trump the province on our regulations. And that's something that we just need to be aware of.
Yeah. Okay, so when you're looking, another one of the applications you'll be looking at is a zoning amendment application. And like the official community plan amendment application, we're looking at changing the color or the use of the property, the zone on the property. So again, in the case of one of the yellow R1 properties, may only allow a single family home in that zone. So if you wanted to build a townhouse on that property or apartment building, you would have to go through a rezoning application. And that would change the zoning designation on that property from the R1 single family residential to a higher density residential zone. So we have about 5 different multifamily residential zones, from sort of townhouses through stacked townhouses through smaller apartment buildings to larger apartment, so there's a whole series of zones depending on what you're looking to build. And so you will be the sort of first set of eyes on that application when it comes forward. When those applications come forward, there's usually a concept of what the applicant wants to do ultimately with that property. So if they want to build an apartment building on that site, then they would provide a site plan and a picture of the apartment building, or the elevations of the apartment building and the parking, and some general siting and design of the site. If they aren't coming with, as part of their rezoning application, if they aren't including the development permit application, which is the details of what's going to happen on that site, then it's a bit awkward, because you're going forward with an application that, getting back to this C2 zone. So we have an application, which I'll show you a report from a little later, which is an application to rezone a property from an R1 zone to a C2 zone. Now they're saying in that application that they would like to do a bowling alley and a restaurant. But without having a development permit as part of that application, we have to assume that it could be any one of those uses listed in the zone. Could be an automobile repair, it could be a gas station, it could be an amusement facility, it could be anything. And so it's, in my opinion, difficult for council and the public to get a really good idea as to whether they want to approve this rezoning application without having a really good idea as to what's proposed for that property. Part of my concern with this is that you have land flippers who come in, they just want to rezone the property to get the added value that they get, because obviously if you can only build a single family home on the property, it's worth this amount. If you can build an apartment building on it, it's worth this amount. They go through a rezoning application and they just get this land lift without any payback to the community. They just they don't even have to develop it. They can just move on, sell the property. They could care less. I'm out. I got my money, I'm out. Whereas if they're coming in with a development permit, they have to build what they include in their development permit application. It's like the use of the property, the exact design, floor plans, landscape plans, siting of building, parking, all the details of that development. Now, the difficulty from the developer's perspective is, well, why would I spend all this money doing all these plans when I don't even know I'm going to get the rezoning? So it is a risk on their part that they have to put this additional money. But if you're serious about developing the property, then it's a much more efficient process because you're getting both applications approved at the same time. You're not getting their rezoning approved and then starting the development permit application process. So if a developer says, well, that's too much of a risk, and like, well, are you really interested in developing this property then? Like if you're not all in, then, I guess.
Thank you. I guess the part that's confusing for me is, and use this example because it was before us, and a development permit for this so-called bowling alley. And I don't have a problem with the C2 zoning, but I did have a problem with, does anybody talk to the developer and saying, look, what you're proposing here isn't likely going to work because with a bowling alley and a restaurant, you're going to need this many parking spaces. Does anybody have that talk with the developer when he throws this sketch in? And it's, basically just a sketch. I think it's a disservice to the public when something like that comes through and they say, oh, yay, a bowling alley and a restaurant, which we desperately need. But do we not, as a community, have the saying, look, it's a great idea, but these are the problems you're going to have. So that's the part that has me bewildered is, like I say, when it came before me, I just, there's no parking around there at all. None, other than you use somebody's private property. So what's your comment on that? I mean, do we talk to them and say, that's wonderful, but these are the problems you're going to have if you develop this land as a bowling alley.
So that goes exactly to my point, is that if somebody comes in with a rezoning application, technically they don't have to show us anything that they're proposing on the lot. They can just say, I just want to see C2 zoning. And any of those uses are permitted. And so it makes it difficult for staff to determine what kinds of studies we need, because what kind of traffic are we, if we're doing a traffic impact study, how much traffic is this going to generate? If we're going to need services, how much sewer capacity is this going to, is it a restaurant? If it's a restaurant, it's a different thing than if it's a 3-unit townhouse, there's very different, uses, and they all have different impacts and different amounts of parking required. If the development permit is brought together with the rezoning application, it down to the square inch of everything that's going to happen on that property. How much parking they're going to need, how much traffic, how much servicing. Like it's a much more fulsome application that we then can review and say, okay, this makes sense or it doesn't make sense. But even if they show a sketch showing the bowling alley and the restaurant, you don't have to do that.
No,
All we're doing as a municipality is saying, we're giving you a C2 zone. Anything that's permitted in that C2 zone is permitted unless you have a development permit associated, which nails down exact details as to what is going to be developed on that site. So it's common to do both, to have development permits be required as in association with the rezoning, and it's common to just have rezonings go through. And 99.9% of the time, the applicant will show something like, this is generally what I'm looking to develop on this site. This is why I'm looking to get this rezoning.
So
that- yeah.
further to that, sorry, to the chair, could this committee make that recommendation that when we come for a zoning change, to a commercial zoning change, that we require a development permit with that zoning change?
Certainly, yeah. So it would be, you know, a council policy that is
Right.
what we're gonna be requiring of applicants when they come in. And I think it'd be something you'd wanna have some discussion with the development community with, because you're gonna get pushback, of course.
Well, of course, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Just that I've seen two instances now where it's gone both ways. One, that we asked for a great deal of studies to be made, and the person doesn't even have to do any of the things they said, and they have to jump through a lot of hoops and pay a lot of money. Maybe it's to their advantage in the end. And then we see another one come through where we ask nothing. So it's a little confusing to me. I'd rather have it a little bit clearer, and maybe that's our job here. So I appreciate what you said to me and in the detail, because I have a better understanding of it now. All right, thanks.
So just if I could respond, so
I think I know which, I think we all, well, many of us know which properties we're looking at and which cases we're looking at. And I would like to point out that in the case of the Murray Road property, all the information on the development was not required. That was something the applicant brought forward, but it was not required. That's not within our rules, and it wasn't required by staff or by our rules. That's, I believe, a misconception, which I would like staff to confirm or deny, because that was my impression. The rules do not require this. It was brought forward. I think mostly because of a perception, and probably not wrongfully, that there would be pushback on the part of the public. And so the applicant for the rezoning wanted to bring forward as much evidence as possible. But could you please clarify that for me?
yeah, so both applications were required to do a traffic impact assessment, to do sewer servicing, I mean, we ask the same things of both rezonings, the bowling alley and the Murray Road. The one difference is that there was a heritage tree on the Murray Road property. And the applicant was saying that they wanted to save the tree, and that was a part of their rezoning application. So at that point in time, I said, okay, well, if you're telling the public that this tree is going to be saved, then you need to do a tree assessment to identify where that tree is going to live any length of time, how it's going to be preserved long-term, like during construction, how you're going to fence around it and make sure that none of the trucks and fill and things get placed around the tree to kill the roots. So that we know, and that's in a covenant and it's put on the title of the property, so that even if this person sells the property, that the next person has to maintain that tree and follow all those rules. So in that case, there was that specific feature of the site that the applicant wanted to preserve and wanted to make, and it was important in the public hearing because there was a lot of people there who were like adamant that this tree be preserved. And if they were just like, yeah, we're going to do that, well, there's no guarantee, right? They could cut it down the next day. Whereas, well, okay, if that's what you really intend to do, then we'll put this into a covenant. That covenant gets put on the title of the property, and that goes into the future for any new owner of the property. So in that case, that was a separate issue that was specific to that site. But the bowling alley site, and then getting back to the detailed design of the use, that was their decision to provide the look of the building, the parking areas, the landscaping. That's their choice because they knew they were going into a contentious public hearing, that they wanted to have that information for the public. But we didn't require that of them. So they had the same requirements for both applications other than the tree covenant.
So I will make note at this point in time that Councillor Beddoes was actually correct and that I was wrong. It turns out, no. Well, I'm going to finish my statement though, because you're not going to hear it again. I'm just saying, this is it. It seems that there were some actual differences in terms of staff asking things of the applicant that were not asked of the other applicant. So Councillor Beddoes, please continue.
Oh, just very quickly, but when you do a traffic impact study, which you've asked for both these properties, I don't want to dwell on the Murray Road because that's long done. Everything's final on that, and I wasn't even supposed to be involved with it back then, but this is after the fact. But anyways, the traffic impact study, when you ask for a traffic impact study and you don't know the end use of what that lot's going to be, how can you do a traffic impact study?
It's a good question. You actually do it as per what they're proposing.
I think I understand like this.
Jaden, correct me if I'm wrong.
One more question.
Sorry,
and-
I just wanted to get
Oh,
Jaden
please.
to correct me in terms of the studies that we asked for those
Yeah.
two applications and what the traffic impact assessment was based on.
Yeah, generally, if the applicant has an idea of what their concept is, we'll do a TIA based on the uses and say the number of units or commercial area of that proposal. We can also look at highest and best use. So there's kind of two ways we can approach this. But if there are changes further down the line, say a development permit, we would still have an opportunity to look at another TIA if that concept or proposal had changed.
Okay, so basically at the time of rezoning, you're going to be looking at traffic impact studies and further down the line with a development permit, if things have changed radically, another traffic. Perfect.
That's possible.
Okay, and I think that we're going to take one more question and then we're going to allow Mr. Marshall to continue.
Okay, just a question and then an observation. Regarding the rezoning and a development permit, if the project doesn't go forward, the rezoning stands, correct? So just for clarity, so if for example, the bowling alley, if it gets turned to C2 and the bowling alley doesn't go forward, it remains C2. Okay, and then the other thing, just, talking about the Murray Road and the bowling alley, there's also the OCP makes recommendations on what is the preferred zoning for that area. So I haven't checked this, but it would seem that for the bowling alley, everything beside it is C2, and it would seem like the OCP would support the C2 zoning. But for Murray Road, it was an OCP amendment, so that the OCP did not support changing the park to C2. So there was some differences there, just to be for clarity.
So this is an example of the bowling alley report. And I don't expect you to read it all other than just the headings. So this report starts with a recommendation. In this case, the recommendation was to that council direct staff to schedule a public, schedule a public hearing related to the proposal amendment bylaw. And then they have a number of conditions related to that. So in this case, the report always has sort of a summary of the report to start with. It speaks to the site context. So what's around the site? What's the site look like itself? What's on the site itself? What's around the site? Then we look at what does the official community plan say for this site? So the official community plan does show this as a commercial site for the future. So as going through the rezoning, that makes sense. Okay, this is something the staff will recommend. So we go through the various policies in the official community plan and show how this particular application meets those policies. Then we look at the actual bylaw itself. So in this case, on the bottom right of that screen, you have what's permitted in the R1 zone. So that's the zone it is right now. So you can see it's just the single family home and the duplex is what's permitted. And then going to the C2 zone, so you can see how the land use on that property is going to change. So now it can just have a single family home or a duplex. If it gets changed to the C2, then these are all the zones that are permitted carrying on the next page. So you can see a long laundry list of uses that would be permitted on that site. So then, sorry, I'm just going to my next page. So then there would be a conclusion, a recommendation, council considers it. Well, I guess you guys would consider it. You would make a recommendation for first and second reading. And then that would go to council. After first and second reading, it gets a public hearing identified. In this case, in the case of the bowling alley, it's a commercial zone property, so a public hearing is required. The new housing legislation the province passed said that all new residential rezonings don't require a public hearing. That's just to avoid not in my backyard kinds of circumstances. So allowing higher density residential rezonings to go through without a public hearing. But in this case, it is a commercial rezoning, so there would be a public hearing involved. There would be ads in the newspaper. There would be a sign on the property. And when it comes to a public hearing, it happens at a council meeting. The members of the public have an opportunity to come and provide their input on whether they feel this is a good or a bad idea, depending on their perspective. So that's the rezoning application process. Just briefly talking about a development variance permit applications. So that is if you want to vary the conditions of the zone. So if it's an R1 zone and somebody wants to put a single family home closer to the street than what the setback required in the zone is, then you'd have to get a development variance permit to allow your home to be a little closer to the street than what the zoning actually allows for. If you want to build your home higher than what the maximum height limit is, if you want to provide less parking than what's required, if you want to have a lesser setback from a creek or a river or an ocean, and those are all things that you would get a variance for. Now, it's my understanding the variances won't be coming to you, they'll only be coming to council, but I just wanted you to be aware of the different applications. And then finally, there's the Board of Variance, which is a separate committee appointed by council, and they only look at variances to the zoning bylaw in which there's considered a hardship. And a hardship would be a situation where you might have like a rock face that comes down, and the lot actually technically includes that rock face, so there's not a lot of room to build a house, on it. So maybe you get some relief on some of those setbacks because, you're trying to build the house on the flat part of the property, or it's a weird shaped lot that was created 100 years ago and it's like got weird lines, and so to put a house in there, it's kind of problematic. Hardship is not financial. But anyway, you won't be dealing with Board of Variances issues, but just to be aware that there is a separate body that looks at variances. The other thing to keep in mind is we have been through a development application process review that's happened over the last couple of years. And one of the things that came out of that review and that has taken place is I've been delegated the authority to approve development variance applications, minor ones that aren't contentious or big issues. So those ones won't need to go to council. That obviously can happen a lot quicker that way because staff just present a report to me. There's no public involvement. We're not notifying neighbors and going through that whole process. It's not going to council. It's just I signed at the bottom and say yes. The other thing that happened prior to this latest round of review of the planning processes is that I have been delegated the authority to issue development permits, not all development permits, but not for the downtown core. But I can issue development permits for multifamily residential outside of the downtown core.
Just want to clarify for the committee. So based on this, which applications will actually go through the committee for recommendation to council? And will all of that type of application go through the committee or just some?
So the applications that will go through the committee will be official community plan amendments, rezoning applications, development permits. Agricultural Land Commission.
Yes. Mhm.
Applications. So we have agricultural land reserve, which is land that's been preserved for agricultural land for forever. And if somebody wants to use some of that agricultural land for anything other than agriculture, then they have to apply to the Agricultural Land Commission to have that land removed from the Agricultural Land Reserve. And the Agricultural Land Commission makes the final determination on those applications, but they refer it to us. So we take a look at it in terms of our perspective on things, and we send our comments to the Land Commission, Agricultural Land Commission, and so we would be bringing those applications to you as well.
And just to clarify, that would be all of those applications, correct?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry. And those are all ones going to council. Yeah. So the last thing I wanted to talk to you about was some of the policy work that we're working on right now. And Jaden and Holden have been doing a lot of that policy work. So of course, the biggest one for us that's on the docket is updating and the official community plan. So they went through a process sort of 2020 to 2022, and they came up with a draft. That draft got 2 readings and a public hearing. And then due to COVID and change of council and turnover of staff, that sat idly for the last 2 years. And so it's council's direction for staff to pick up the ball, pick up the draft official community plan that was developed between 2020 and 2022 and bring it back to the table. And so we developed a sort of game plan for how to do that. And we're looking at getting that adopted by December of 2025 this year. And so it's not just reviving that draft official community plan, but it's also incorporating new provincial legislation that's happened since 2022. The big one being the small scale multi-unit housing legislation that requires all municipalities to allow for up to 4 units, in Sooke's case, up to 4 units of housing on every single family zoned property in Sooke. And so we've actually made those changes to our zoning bylaw now, but we also had to do, as part of that legislation, a housing needs assessment, which is the housing we need for the next 5 and 20 years. And we have to incorporate the findings from that housing needs assessment and the SHMU, the small scale multi-unit housing legislation, as part of the OCP update. So we'll include those provincial changes or provincial legislation that was adopted over the last couple of years and get that incorporated, as well as the changes that came up as a result of the public process of that last round of public OCP meetings. So the other thing we're working on is an affordable housing contribution policy. So we've actually had Urban Systems do some pro formas of how much it costs to build, to subdivide, go through the whole planning process and build and sell lots, single family lots, what the profit margin is. And then the same thing for multifamily housing, like apartment style development, so that we can provide. So we've been given an estimate of it's between $2 and $12,000 depending on variables, but. And so then how much of that we should be asking for them to pay per unit for affordable housing. So right now we haven't got any scientific backing to it, but we're just charging $3,000 a unit for affordable housing when somebody comes in for a rezoning. If residential, if a residential use is being proposed, not if it's a commercial use, like the bowling alley and the restaurant wouldn't be required to pay towards affordable housing, but if it's a townhouse or a multifamily, like a apartment building, then they would have to pay $3,000 a door for those units. So this is basically providing some data as to why we're going to come up with the figure we're going to come up with to charge, and some of the rules around charging that, and how we're going to use that money. So what else we got here? Small scale multi-unit housing legislation updates. So I talked about that, where we made those changes to our zoning bylaw. There's been a lot of work in the last 2 years on the development approval process review. And the result of some of that work was a new bylaw called the procedures bylaw, which identifies how we process development applications. And so the purpose around that work was to figure out where the pinch points were in the application process, where we can speed things up, where we can create efficiencies. We've got different, we're using our Tempest software to track all the steps in the process, and then we can figure out how long things are taking, how long it's taking the applicant to do things, how long it's taking staff to do things, so that we can then start figuring out where the problems are in the process. We've delegated certain authorities to me to speed things up and make it easier for developers and quicker for developers to get things done. And we've created a new application, actual paper and digital applications. Used to be that no matter what application you wanted to apply for in the planning department and in the building department, there was one application. So in the building department, if you just wanted to put a deck on the back of your house, you filled out the same application as a developer who was building like the Bayshore, 90 unit apartment building. So of course, there's a lot in that application that's not relevant to the person who's doing the deck on the back of their property, so back of their house. So we've got a separate, addition application and a separate renovation application and a separate, so that it's easier for the applicant to go through these application processes and more obvious as to what's needed. Anyway, those are just a number of the things that came up when we did the review, and we met with the Sooke Builders Association, and staff were interviewed, and so those were some of the things we came up with. So that's in a nutshell what the planning department's doing. And so all of these policies that I just listed are all things that would come to you as part of the process. You would be the first step in us bringing these policies forward, or these amendments to bylaws. And there is multiple opportunities or set times throughout the OCP update in which we'll be going out to the public, going to council, coming to the planning committee. So you will be the first stop in when we bring things forward, when we have background papers and updates, and when we have a public process, the results of the public process, and when we identify the changes we're going to make, they'll all come to you first, and then you'll make recommendations to council.
Thank you very much. So that was a lot of information for everyone. Good timing. Well done. This man is a professional. I want to point this out. All right. So at this point in time, with all this information in mind, I'm going to do a quick round around the table, very quick round. What do you think you want to accomplish now? keeping in mind that we have a huge amount of work to do that may not align with your pet project. So I'm going to start, well, actually, I'll start with Ellen and then I'll work my way back around to you because you're giving more time. Ellen.
Can you repeat the question?
The question is, now that you have all this information on everything that's ahead of us and all that we are responsible for, what's left of your own personal projects that you'd still like to look at?
Oh, I don't think I have personal projects. Of course, I'm excited to continue working on the OCP because as I said, I was on that committee and we worked for almost 2 years on it. So it would be nice to finish that. But no, I'm excited to learn more and just contribute to our community and good planning process.
I think one thing that was really made me aware throughout this is the lack of communication maybe between the staff and the client. So I hope that we can work on that a bit better and see from both perspectives better.
Good question. No, I do believe, yeah, we have got our work cut out for us for sure. And I think I'm gonna sit back a little bit and not voice all of my opinions all at once for a change.
Gee, that's a tough one for me, for voicing all my opinions. I always have opinions, and of course, that's why you pay me. Not much, by the way, but I frankly, I found it very good today. I very much enjoyed your presentation. Surprisingly, I learned something. The first comment was that we could sit back and play with their phones and things like that, but that wasn't true. I learned some things even more. And I'm actually quite excited that we will have a sort of more in-depth look at some of these things in a little different, more relaxed environment, because sometimes at council, we don't get a whole lot of time to do anything or even chat amongst ourselves. Usually the things, if there's a difference between a couple of councillors, it only becomes evident then. Where at a committee like this, we could see some of the pitfalls and maybe have an opportunity and with other people involved to iron out some of these things before they get to that stage where it's so rigid and you know, boom, you have to make a decision here and there. So I'm quite excited that this when I came in here, I said, what the hell are we going to be doing for all this time? I have a better understanding, and I like what I hear from everybody and where we're going. And staff. I understand a bit more about staff's position, which is always a mystery.
Yeah, I'll echo exactly what Al said. This idea of this committee being a first stop as opposed to us arriving at council meetings, and so it'd be a great opportunity to develop recommendations for council. I think there's going to be some thick agendas which we will need to work through patiently, and I do look forward to seeing. I don't know how the OCP will be presented to us. Will we be seeing the initial iterations of the reviews, or how will that play out?
Like I said, there are a number of set dates at which we've planned to go back to council, and the planning advisory committee would be there, or the land use and development committee, sorry, I'm used to planning advisory, will be again the sort of first stop. Yeah.
I agree with both my former councillors that just spoke. What I like about this committee in the past and hopefully in the future is the informality of it. So you're able to have a discussion, look across the aisle to staff and say, what if? Like, what if we made this boneheaded decision? Like, and quite often you're voting on an issue, pro or con, and you know, the recommendations come to us and we don't quite understand the whole background of those recommendations. And I think this is an opportunity to have deeper conversations around that. Why? Why have you chosen that recommendation? Why has staff chosen that recommendation? Because they're doing utmost to do their very best job, following our bylaws, and I understand that process. But if you're a lay person, like everybody around this table, sometimes you don't get those nuances, right? Like, and I think that's the value of the committee, is having those informal discussions. Because we have to go from here to recommend to council. Basically, and you know, with 4 of us on the committee, it should be a no-brainer by the time we've hashed it out. Right? So it should be, right?
Well, we know what we're objecting, you know.
And well, exactly.
Sorry.
Thank you.
So actually, I really agree with everything that's been said, either by council or by everyone else. This has been awesome. I'm going to go back to something that was said by a couple of people right at the beginning. I'm really looking forward to the interaction where economic development is going to intersect with what we're doing. I don't think we've necessarily seen what that's going to look like just yet, because there's so much other stuff to do, but I hope there'll be opportunities for us to work on that. I know that one of my own pet projects, I'm going to own it, is that someday we could have the zoning to have a pub or, you know, some kind of watering hole in every neighborhood. And that's just something I think is needed so that we can actually walk places, get places, and have more complete neighborhoods. And I know it's a hell of a zoning challenge in terms of all of this stuff. So we'll see. That's just, I'm going to keep hoping, but we'll see how it goes. So I think at this point in time, unless there's something further, I'm going to look at adjourning the meeting. And I see nothing further, so I'm adjourning the meeting. Thank you very much, everyone. Timing, impeccable.